the Ticats Audio Network. This is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
The good ship Argo are sailing along. How important is Chad Kelly to the Canadian Football League? Who have the best uniforms in the league? And with some tasty treats approaching on the Week 5 schedule, which game will satisfy your appetite? Time to eat, folks. It's the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Folks, this is the top CFL podcast that offers the opinions of the league's best columnists, analysts, and broadcasters. Let us introduce the crew for this week, and no stranger to the CFL This Week is TSN sideline ace and feature specialist. Great to see you there, Matthew Scianitti.
Bubba, always good to see you, my friend.
Right on. Covering the Manitoba sports scene like no other with his wit and opinion, Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. Good to see you, Bal.
Bubba's pleasure is all mine, man. Let's do this.
You know what? And making his podcast debut with us, he's a Hall of Famer. And you know what? After a little research, I didn't even know this, Jeff Avery. Of course, he's with the Redblacks radio network and as the analyst. I didn't know that you'd been covering the Rough Riders, the Renegades, and the Redblacks. I mean, congratulations. Those have been either some really good times or tough times.
Very lengthy times, Bubba. Very lengthy times. Just a matter of age, that's all.
Folks, let's get right down to it. And Jeff, seeing that you are the experienced man in the crew, I'm going to ask you the easiest question of all, or maybe the toughest. Who is the best team in the CFL right now?
Okay, well, we can go a couple of ways with this, but I think obviously you have to give Toronto the initial nod. But, you know, I look at how Vernon Adams played for BC, and I thought BC would be the class of the league as the season went on, but it just shows how important that quarterback position is in this league. And you know, Toronto doesn't have a world beater yet to be determined in Chad Kelly, but I think right now you have to give that crown to the Toronto Argonauts.
Matthew?
I agree. I think the one thing in watching Vernon, and I know Jeff Hamilton would probably say this after watching them beat the Bombers, was that you were like, okay, what happens now? Because Vernon in his history in this league has shown moments where you're like, this guy could be a potential Hall of Fame quarterback in terms of all the talents he has, but that's on the smallest sample size. Then you have a game like last night where after 2 interceptions, you're like, like this could be a bit tricky. And then as we were talking before we came on air, when you get to 4, 5, 6, you're wondering, I don't know, when do you pull the guy? So BC has a great defensive line. Ryan Phillips and John Bowman have done a great job. But I still have to give it to the Bombers. Like to watch them in Montreal, and you know, Mr. Hamilton and I were there, although I was standing in the rain. It was vicious, but that's the kind of game where like a team that has a composed culture comes out and executes, and that's what the Bombers did for the most part. But yeah, I as well as I think the Argos have played, I'm still not entirely convinced that they can kind of, you know, even though certainly they've beaten the Bombers in the Grey Cup, but this iteration of the Argos, I need to see a little bit more.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I think you're going to see a lot of power rankings this week that are going to have Toronto at the top, and rightfully so. I mean, they're the last unbeaten team in the CFL. They've shown, you know, through their opponents they've faced this season that, you know, they're up to the challenge, and certainly after defeating the BC Lions, who you know, let's face it, stole the Bombers' lunch money the week before. You know, they deserve to be there, but that's power rankings. If you're putting your money on who's winning the Grey Cup this year, who's the best team in the league, it has to be the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at this point. I mean, I don't think you can look at 4 weeks of football and suggest that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers still aren't the class of the league. I mean, they got their butts whipped by BC, but the narrative coming out of that, of course, was that, you know, Vernon Adams had a great game and certainly did have a great game, but he's feast or famine. I still think there's a lot with him that, you know, he can come in. I think he's got the potential to win the Grey Cup this year with the BC Lions. He's also got the potential to throw, you know, to have BC finish third and lose in the West semi. Like I with the Bombers, we know they're going to be consistent week in and week out. That, you know, I think that was a wake-up call for them to answer back the way they did against Montreal. I mean, 3 points is not a lot of points in the CFL, as we know. And at this point, I just go back to the question, if I had to put my life on one team right now, I'd probably have it ride with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers before the BC Lions in Toronto.
Hey, guys, why is everyone having such a problem saying the Toronto Argonauts? Like, they're undefeated. They're the defending Grey Cup champions. There's something to be said about the heavyweight champion not losing his crown until he loses. So, Matthew, why are we struggling to say the Argonauts?
It's not so much a struggle and I need to see more. Certainly there were plays yesterday. We even said it on the broadcast, where it appeared that Chad Kelly was breaking all the rules that, you know, from a quarterback perspective, throwing across his body, you know, throwing across the field. Like, he is playing with confidence right now, and that's clear. His team clearly believes in him. That was something that I saw last year when he was the backup. Like, in practice, like he has all those leadership qualities. It's the adversity side of it. It's not a criticism. It's just, I know what I get when I see the Bombers. I know that in a situation like they had, you know, Hamilton puts it, you know, perfectly, like a team that steals their lunch money, that just outplays them, outworks them. And, you know, I spoke to, as I know Jeff did, I spoke to Willie Jefferson and Zach Caleros and Mike O'Shea before the broadcast. And they were like, yeah, you know, it happens. And we came back in and we recognized our mistakes. No finger pointing. We're going to get back to it. You know, this is our jobs. And it was like workmanlike. And especially in those conditions. And that is the difference between, you know, again, not to repeat what Jeff said, but a power ranking and being an established culture. And right now, the Argos have to prove a little bit more.
Jeff, is that sort of the same thinking for you with the Argonauts?
Yeah, kind of. Like, and I do think, look, I do think they're not getting maybe the respect they deserve right now because of it. Because, I mean, I'll be honest with you, when they announced Chad Kelly as their starting quarterback, and I know we're going to talk more about that, you know, down the road here, I was like, this team's got no chance. I just felt it was just too much to handle on one person's shoulders. But again, what Matthew said, like, it really to me it boils down to, you know, the larger sample size than a week to week kind of, you know, decision making. Like the fact that people were even thinking the Bombers are too old, or is their dominant run over because of you know, what the BC Lions were able to do, which was fair in some respects. But then the other part of it was the Bombers were 27-2 at home before that game. They had one of those losses was late in the season when they already clinched, or was against Hamilton, actually was a legit game. And the other one was Montreal, where they could have won if Mark Leggio didn't miss 2 field goals at the end of the game. So they hadn't lost to a West opponent on home turf since the 2018 Banjo Bowl. Like it was one tough week. I'd say one uncharacteristic week for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, because, you know, they don't lose like that, and they had the wake up call. Other thing I find interesting that speaks to culture is the Blue Bombers treated that loss the same way they treat wins. They don't pat them, you know, they don't get over critical. They don't, like as Matt said, they don't finger point. They saw it as like, okay, we're going to come in and watch this, fix this, and be better next week. The same approach they do when they win games. Well, the BC Lions, and I wrote about this in my CFL Rundown column, Alexander Holland was on Instagram on Monday posting a post about how we come into your house and pretty much do what we want, celebrating a victory 4 days after it happened. That would never happen in Winnipeg. And you know, like you say that, and then you go into Toronto and you kind of get bullied the next week. So it's that culture. It's learning how to win and we're learning how to lose, and the Bombers have been able to do that. I'm not 100% sure the BC Lions have been able to do that.
Mr. Avery, we toss around the word culture a lot, and it's no doubt the Bombers certainly have that winning culture. But at some point you get old, and at some point it ends. Do you see the ending of this reign at some point? No,
not at all. And I probably fall on my own sword a bit here, just with recency bias, because going with, as Jeff said, it's a short sample size, just trying to, this is where we are right now. if you look at Winnipeg, all those positive things that have been said about Winnipeg, to me, it just comes down to the guy taking the snaps. If you compare those top three teams, there's no question Collaros is the class of the league. He's consistent. He's got a skill set that's really hard to match. His ability to throw the ball deep, he does so many things so well, but what he does mostly is he's consistent. You don't see him go out there and have a game like Vernon Adams had. You don't see, and as we talked about, you don't know 100% what to expect out of Chad Kelly. He's so young in this league, he could have some awful times ahead of him, and we've seen great ones have that. Go back many, many years ago. Remember when Anthony Cavillo came into this league playing for the Las Vegas Posse? That guy couldn't throw. He was throwing the ball more times to the opposition than he was to his own receivers, and look what happened with him. So the good and the bad is ahead for everybody, but Collaros, when you look at the overall package, I don't think you can ever say Winnipeg's getting too old. I think they have a lot of talent across the board, but to me, the key for them is the guy taking the snaps. And he, if you look at an overall picture, puts them to the top. But I'm going to fall and say recency bias. I say right now, Toronto's playing the best football.
Okay, well, let's stick with Toronto. And Jeffrey Hamilton, I'm going to come with you with this. TSN's David Naylor recently writes that Argos QB Chad Kelly is the most important player in the Canadian Football League. I'm going to ask you, is he? If he is, why? And if not, why not?
When I saw that question, I was wondering if it was just prior to Dave promoting his terrific TSN production on Chad Kelly as maybe a hype statement for it. But I certainly think there's, which he did an incredible job with, by the way. I think there's a debate. I think there's an argument on both sides of that. Towards the yes, look, he's the face. All quarterbacks are the face of the team, and he's the face of the market that has been long talked about, that needs to be rejuvenated, that needs to be successful for the league to be successful. And I also think we wouldn't be even asking that question if he didn't have the name recognition. Now, we all know that his uncle being Jim Kelly, of course. We all know that Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment likes international, right? They were one of the couple teams that wanted that relationship with the XFL. They want to see the league get bigger, grow beyond Canadian borders. And so in that aspect, I think they brought in a guy who obviously has some talent, as we're seeing here through the first few weeks, but also has that name recognition to get some more attention south of the border. I mean, the reality is I don't think we certainly haven't reached a peak in gaining Canadian CFL fans. We can certainly do a lot more work there, particularly in a city like Toronto. But I think the real lifeline of this league, if they want to grow, if they want to continue to get bigger, that's why they're investing in Genius Sports. That's why they're getting different relationships with Pro Focus Football or whatever. That big, trying to bring kind of a little bit of NFL to the CFL. And so in that respect, I think this is really important as far Chad Kelly being really important in selling that market, because people know who he is south of the border. They know that name. They can use him to sell, whatever, packages or eyeballs or just attention to the CFL. You look at Barstool Sports, they wear Chad Kelly's jersey. You know what I mean? Like, I'd be keeping an eye on Barstool Sports. This is something that I've heard lots about in the past, like just mumblings, rumors around the Grey Cup. But there's a relationship between Barstool Sports and Chad Kelly, and could there possibly be a deeper relationship between Chad Kelly and Barstool Sports in the future? Who knows? Maybe I'm just setting rumors up here, but I do think that given the international appeal that Chad Kelly can potentially have and growing the game, because the fact is, I really appreciate the players in the CFL. Like, you look at Zach Collaros, he is the class of the league. What he's been able to achieve, in this league in a short amount of time with Winnipeg is nothing short of spectacular. And there's kids out there that want to be the next, Zach Collaros. But if this league wants to grow, I think they need those U.S. eyeballs, and a guy like Chad Kelly with the name recognition that he has, with the relationships that he has with some sports companies down there, may just be the answer of growing that market in Toronto for sure.
So Matthew, was this clickbait or not?
I just to build off of Jeff's point, it is interesting. college football has such a currency in the States, and you saw it with Johnny Manziel. Certainly the attention that he grabbed. Chad Kelly is not Johnny Manziel. Like, Chad Kelly is fully bought in. Like, he wants to come here and win, and not just win, he wants to dominate. And it's when speaking to him, it's amazing because we speak about what he can do for the league right now. Like, Kelly's absolutely, I believe, fixated on proving something to like the entire football world because, you know, Mr. Irrelevant situations off the field with whether the Broncos or the Colts in his time in the NFL. And now he's trying to illustrate just who he is as a football professional and committed to the game. Absolutely. You could certainly bring in a bunch of international brands, and Barstool flirted a little bit with the CFL with Manziel, as I said. But it's something that to be mindful of because, you know, this league wants very hard to be international, not just the United States, and a segment of the United States in terms of associating yourself with Barstool Sports and elements in and around that, good, bad, or indifferent. I think the league wants to have a wider appeal, but Chad Kelly is still the most important player because this is Toronto. This is the biggest city in the country. It is the oldest football franchise, not just in Canada and North America, and he happens to be the starting quarterback of it and wears the same number as the most important quarterback in and around the Golden Horseshoe area of the last 25 years, being Jim Kelly. So there are so many, you know, frames of reference here that you could certainly see the importance of him. But ultimately, like, the league can't go ahead and just bank on Chad Kelly being successful. Like, I go back to Mr. Avery's point. Like, I want to see the league, especially in this era of such a dearth of quarterback talent, like not just here, but in the NFL and the USFL and the XFL, like paying more attention to guys like, and the achievements of someone like Zach Collaros as, you know, faces of the league. And because right now, whether Chad Kelly's certainly a name because of the team he associates with and the city that's associated with that team, there are guys who are doing bigger and better things in this league right now who have been doing bigger and better things in this league who deserve to be marketed far beyond Chad Kelly. But Chad Kelly just serendipitously is in this place. So it's not that he doesn't earn it. He is just the benefit of good circumstance right now because he happens to be successful in Toronto. I'm not necessarily sure that would be the case if he were a quarterback of another team.
Jeff Avery, I know you know these names. Vince Ferragamo, Ricky Williams. We just said Johnny Manziel, Rocket Ismail. Were they the most important people in the CFL? And I mean, and is that just too much pressure to put on Chad Kelly?
Well, potentially it could be, and I'll use the word potentially again. I think Chad Kelly potentially could be the most important person in the CFL, without question, and for the reasons that were eloquently outlined by both Matthew and Jeff: corporate, international, exposure to the States, all those good things. But I think the most important person in the CFL quite often is, you know, just who's doing the job. And I look to last year, the most important person in the CFL last year, you know, played a part of a season. Nathan Rourke was incredible. He was beyond statistical achievements. He is now down in the States, and he is carrying that CFL brand with him, probably not as publicly as the CFL would like, but nevertheless, there was your most important player in the league. And yes, go back to those many years ago, Ferragamo coming up here, there were specific reasons why certain people would become the most important person in the league. And Kelly has that opportunity. But, you know, who's to say he stays for more than a year? His desire has been NFL. He tried and he failed, but I think he still has that in the bottom of his heart that many of these Americans do. So, yeah, he potentially could be the most important guy in the CFL this year, and maybe, hopefully, for many years to come, to really revive football, CFL football, I should say, in the Toronto GTA. But, yeah, I just don't think you can heap all that much on one guy and then predict here he's going to be the most important guy in the CFL. It just doesn't happen like that, being anointed that position.
Mr. Hamilton, you're the farthest away from the center of the universe, so let me throw. I mean, but that's the conversation that we hear across the country. So is there a little bit of that somewhere mixed in? The fact that it's
what do you mean?
Bruno. Well, just the fact that it's Toronto and that the rest of the league, say if you're in Regina, do you care about Chad Kelly? Do you think it helps the CFL? Are you thinking that in BC? Are you even thinking that in your place in Winnipeg?
I don't think if you're a Bomber fan or you're a Rough Rider fan that you're necessarily focused on that. But if you're as a fan of the league, and personally as someone who's not just a fan of the league, but is someone who cares about the future of the league and understands some of its shortcomings and obstacles in front of it, it's just rejuvenating that market. I mean, the Toronto market is still a very important market outside of gate revenue, right? I mean, there's a lot of eyeballs from the region that watch TSN every weekend, that watch a lot of football, right? So it's just about really getting butts in the seats, right, through two Toronto games, because we know how big of the market it is, and you want to have that market thriving. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, you're looking at other markets. You look at Calgary. I mean, they're struggling a little bit this year, and but how often have you heard that Winnipeg and Saskatchewan essentially carry the league or help fund the league a lot? I mean, that's great, but we need other markets to kind of catch up. And if you're looking at Toronto's been a conversation for years and years. The fact that they're now, and they've won in the past. Obviously, they won the 2017 Grey Cup, but now that they have a challenge. They not only need to be good on the field, they need to be cool off it for it to be sold. And so that's where a Chad Kelly could potentially be that fix, right? He's not it's McLeod Bethel Thompson was a great guy. He produced great quotes. He was a really great human being, but he wasn't that shiny piece that the Toronto Argonauts need to sell to the fair weather fan, or the fan who looks at CFL in that market and sees 4 other sports that are significantly better and more interesting. They need to find that coolness factor, and I think that's why the focus is on Toronto, because of the size of the market, because of the impact it could have on the league, and because at one point in time they were a great franchise that attracted a lot of fanfare and fans. So that's what I think is the focus on Toronto, is because you want a strong Toronto means a strong CFL.
Chad Kelly, stay tuned. Mr. Avery, your team, and it must have felt so good in the broadcast booth, they end that 13-game home losing skid. I'm going to ask you this, and some may laugh, but I think there's some seriousness to it. Do you see them actually being a factor in the East as we continue along with this, where we are early in the season?
Well, time will tell. I mean, as they sit now, probably not. But they have a lot of talent on the sidelines. They have a lot of talent that hasn't seen the field this year. And I go back to this all the time. This is a quarterback-driven league. And the most important piece of the puzzle has yet to step on the football field. If Jeremiah can get back defensively, your strength of your defense is down the middle. If Santos Knox can step on the field and play like he did last year, which is why they signed him. Cariel Brooks missed this last week. He won't be out long. Money Hunter's on the 6th game with a torn pectoral muscle. Again, a drop down a bit in the secondary. Guys are stepping in and doing a good job. But if they can get 3 or 4 of these pieces to the puzzle on the field, I think they can be relevant in the East. They can be somebody that's creating issues for a lot of these teams that are sort of looking towards the postseason and the Grey Cup, like the Torontos. Obviously, Hamilton has a lot of talent themselves that isn't producing right now. But I think this East can become very, very interesting, very intriguing, as you say, as this season progresses. And from Ottawa's perspective, they need to get certain personnel back on the field, and they need to get them performing to make them a more bona fide contender and for a playoff contention, looking for that spot to get into the playoffs, and then anything can happen. So we'll see in the next few weeks. I mean, we'd like to see down in Hamilton this week a certain person on the field, but time will tell. That is still yet to be determined. Practice this week will have a lot to do with that. But yeah, they have an opportunity, but not as they sit right now, I don't think.
Matty, you've seen this team up close, and I think a lot of people at the beginning of the season saw the Redblacks as a team that they make that next step. Do you agree?
Again, I mean, to repeat what a Hall of Famer just said, like there's so many great pieces that General Manager Sean Burke has put together that's currently still on the sidelines, and we don't know what the full picture of the Red Blacks currently looks like, and that makes it hard to give a full assessment of what they could be. There are game breakers on this team. Their defense is great. It's really hard to judge a team beating, the worst team in the league, which is the Edmonton Elks. Like it's hard to judge them. I watched, not to use this question and answer as a way of just dumping on the Elks, but it's just when you're playing the worst team in the league and you're watching this team kind of like a team on the other sidelines kind of look around and be like, okay, what are we doing? It's easy to get those good feelings and to find confidence. This is a key game this week. Like of the games that I'm seeing this weekend, like Hamilton against Ottawa is huge because now certainly Montreal has shown a bit of a vulnerability. The Argos have set the pace in the division, but who's going to be that team that kind of surprises? And there's a lot to gain and a lot to lose for both of these teams because you just don't know who they are yet. I think for Ottawa, it's because they haven't had their full complement and all their talent, and for the Ticats, they're sorting their stuff out. They're trying to, certainly Bo's injury doesn't help, but they're trying to figure out, how to fix issues that a little bit aren't of their own doing because of the injuries, and some of it in the penalties are. So, yeah, I just think that we will learn a lot more about the Red Blacks this week in Hamilton.
Mr. Hamilton, we talk about the quarterback situation in this league and it being a quarterback league and quarterback sport in some ways. Tyree Adams, what your thoughts?
You know what? I thought for a guy who's only been around, what is this, his second season, doesn't have a ton of starts under his belt. I think he brings some flash. I think he brings some energy to the huddle. I think one of the most important parts of being a quarterback beyond the actual talent, like accuracy and a good arm, and obviously in his case also has the legs, you need to bring something that makes your players believe in you. And I think the energy that he brings, if you saw, you watch the game, I mean, he's always been able to bring, create something out of nothing. So he brings that excitement. He brings that kind of play really does endear you to your teammates, that you're not willing to give up a play. You don't just throw ball, out of the sidelines. If things aren't working, you're going to push it for as long as you possibly can. And then he's doing backflips on other guys' touchdowns. So it's like, that like, I don't know, I'm not in that huddle, but I imagine it brings an energy and, a confidence to the group. And so, I think beyond, his performance, they need Jeremiah Masoli, like the Edmonton Elks need a quality quarterback, like the Hamilton Tiger Cats need Bo Levi Mitchell to be behind center. You need that guy. And I thought, I was one of the, I don't want to say one of the few, but I certainly saw a lot of people looking at Ottawa last season and seeing a breakout year. I just didn't see it. And it's the same thing this year. The big difference is they do have better talent. I thought Bobby, I'm not saying this is like I thought as in it didn't happen, but the Bobby Dice factor was supposed to be an important piece there where because in today's coaching, you need that motivator. You can be great at X's and O's, you can be great at drawing up game plans, but if players don't want to run through a wall for you, you're not going to get the best out of them. And that was Paul LaPolice's issue. He's a great offensive coordinator, but nobody was going to run through a wall for him. And I said that right at the beginning of the season. That's just not his thing. I think he would probably like to consider himself a motivator, but the fact of the matter, he's just not that guy. And so Bobby Dice is that guy. And so that's why I see this team not giving up on themselves. I can see that, the confidence not waning with the losses. And while certainly not an impressive victory over the Edmonton Elks, this could be the start of some motivation there that their work paid off. And the sooner Jeremiah Masoli can get back on that roster, the better.
Mr. Avery, is that the feeling about Bobby Dice?
Oh, I believe so, yeah. Players have tremendous respect for him. And as a special teams coordinator, you touch all aspects of your roster. And so when you move into a head coaching position, you've already got a lot of people on your side and a lot of guys that are willing to make that, run through the wall phrase, if you will. And he has that, and I think it's really showing itself through most of the roster. And to Jeff's point, you talk about Tyree being some flash and but he's just genuinely really liked. He's just one of those guys that, everybody really rallies behind. I would have loved to have seen someone show as he led Tuggle into the end zone just to allow him to put his head in there and throw a key block to get his running back into the end zone. That would have sealed the deal for him for the rest of his career.
Especially a guy that skinny. Especially a guy that's skinny.
There's
put his
nothing to
body
it.
on the line.
But he would have.
Yeah.
With a smile on his face, he would have given himself up. But yeah, it's we got to get Masoli. We got to get him back in there. But it's great to see a guy like this. One thing Ottawa's never been able to do is train a quarterback. Never had a young kid that they can bring along. They have an opportunity with two of them here, Crum and Adams. If they can get Masoli in here and operating, then both these gentlemen can learn under him and get some playing time, because I don't think you want to leave Masoli in there if he's back all the time, whether the score is good or bad. And so they should get time under center, which is the only way you develop in this league.
Lamar, he looks like Lamar Jackson to me. Like I've never seen a guy like
his little brother.
He's like his little brother, but he's even smaller, and it's amazing that he takes these hits and gets up and performs the way he does. Matthew Scianitti, let's start with this, because I have always considered you a man of fashion, a man that always looks good, no matter what he does.
I leave that to John Liu. Jeff Hamilton sees John Liu. I leave that title to John Liu.
Hey, Matt, we all saw the great rain jacket you were wearing this weekend. Don't be shy. Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. I'm going to give you that title. No offense to Mr. Liu, who I thought maybe he's the pioneer. Maybe he set it up for you.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but I consider you the man of fashion on TSN right now. And, let's talk a little fashion in the Canadian Football League. And the Alouettes break out the all-red monochrome uniforms last week against the Bombers. Now, they didn't win, but what are your thoughts on this uniform? What do you think about that uniform? And who has the best uniform in the Canadian Football League?
I from the moment I knew this question was going to be posed, I've been thinking quite a lot about it. Listen, the red is a very, very traditional look for the Alouettes, one that goes back, we're talking decades and decades and decades. And so it's nice. It's a solid color. I would have said the Argos because I like the powder blue look, but the oars that are supposed to be oars but look like wings kind of throw everything off. The Bombers have a nice look. I like the look on the helmets, but the jerseys kind of are a little too broken up for me. I have to say the Stamps. The Stamps have done a great job of incorporating what is basically a traditional look from, I believe, like the 50s and 60s to make it more modern and give it a nice feel. Although, yes, there were many jokes when it came out that it looks like a popcorn bag from the 1970s, but it looks pretty clean. Someone was remarking, I was standing next to Sean Bowen last night, and he called the BC Lions away jerseys coffee creamer just because of the way it kind of looked. And but yeah, I like what Calgary's done for a home jersey right now. And I would have tipped a little bit to the Argos. I know the team that has worked very, very hard on that jersey. I just can't get over those oars that look like wings. I can't do it.
Mr. Hamilton, let's go in a million directions there. Okay, first of all, your thoughts on the all red. It kind of reminded me of the Montreal Concorde, if you remember those uniforms. And I don't know, shouldn't the Argos be double blue?
You know what? It's funny. I also, when I saw this question coming up, started to do my research because I was just trying to think of who wears what, where, whatever. I like the red jerseys. I mean, that to me it's flashy, and Montreal's flashy, so it works. You know what I mean? They should pop, and so I definitely give them credit for that. I am kind of with Matt in the sense of I like the powder blue color, but I hate the shoulders. I just don't like that. I like the look of it. I just, for some reason, can't get on board for that. But I am with you, Bubba, in the sense that maybe the double blue should be there. I know a lot of fans when those jerseys came out were arguing for just that. But I don't mind those jerseys either. I think it's a bit of a three-way tie for me. I like Montreal's normal home jerseys. I like that navy blue look and red, and it's sharp. And I don't like a lot of chaos on my jerseys, so it looks the cleanest fit for me. I do like the Bombers home jerseys. I'm with Matt in the sense I like the helmet. I like the stripes they added this year. It wasn't too busy, and it's certainly stuck with their roots. And I also actually I'm going to make it four-way. I really like Saskatchewan's alternate jerseys, the green ones, the throwbacks. They only wear them, I think, once a year. But they're super clean too, and I like the look on that. And then the gunmetal. I like BC's gunmetal home jerseys. I'm about to go over to Hamilton too. I like the black and yellow. I
It's not like every jersey in the league.
It's pretty much every jersey, except for the one that Matt picked out. That's the Calgary jersey. I'm not a huge fan of it for some reason. But yeah, there's lots of great jerseys. Go out there and purchase them. Let this league survive so we can all have a job. They're all equally perfect. Just go out there and purchase them. That's all we ask.
Jeff, pick one, please.
If I had to pick one, I'd go with Montreal's home jerseys. I just like that clean navy look. That would be it.
I have a different perspective, having to try and figure out numbers from a distance to
Fair enough.
My broadcast partner, AJ Jakubek. And we have a lot of trouble with a lot of this stuff. And I almost threw up when Jeff Hamilton said gunmetal. I can't find a number on those jerseys ever. Anywhere. They drive me nuts.
I'm sorry, Jeff.
And I have to go flashback. And I just like some of the old school stuff that both guys mentioned. It's just, I like the old green and gold of the Eskimos. It's traditional for me. I've always liked that uniform. They were too damn successful when I played, but I still like the uniform today. And I like the combination colors. I like, back in the day when the Riders would go with red pants and white jerseys. The Stamps, when the Stamps do their red and black combo. I like that contrasting color network, but I'll stick with the Elks colors.
I hope, just to fit this in quickly, I hope the Redblacks do they tried a bit of a retro Rough Riders look with the helmets, but to go to Jeff, the year that you guys won the Grey Cup in '76, just to go for that nice retro look one time as a jersey would be really, really cool.
I think so.
I'm actually surprised no one said anything about the BC Lions.
I said gunmetal and it made Jeff puke.
I threw up on their gunmetals.
No one liked the all black with the Lions with the orange trim?
The problem with that is at the broadcast part, it's for trying to get names on back of jerseys when you're so many feet high is it's easy for me when I'm on the sidelines, but those broadcast guys, no.
Certainly not. Surprising, guys. I got it. You guys surprised me there. And I'm surprised not a lot of talk. I always thought that universally the Rough Riders, that uniform, because it sells so well and you go to the stadium and it's a sea of green, but no one on the Rough Riders really that much except for Mr. Hamilton and his teasing of
we went once around the league. Yeah, exactly. And that was tough to do, I'll be honest.
Let's clean up with this, guys. Because really, when you look at the schedule this week, week 5 has got a lot of tasty treats for our fans that are just kind of maybe in the car. I'll run through them. Elks at Riders, Stamps at Bombers, Redblacks at Ticats, Alouettes at Lions. Mr. Scianitti, game of the week is?
Ooh, I still at this point, see, Calgary-Winnipeg is interesting because Calgary is dealing with their injuries and they now have to kind of see if they can evolve out of some of those. But I have to go with I still have to go with Hamilton and Ottawa, only because we're going to find out legitimately where these teams stand. Not because this is a race to the bottom, but there's a lot on the line for both teams, and especially for Hamilton. I imagine no one is as that expression that Orlando Steinhauer had after Chris Edwards shoved Austin Mack is probably the expression of what the Ticats season is so far. Just what is going on, and so to find some stability in a win at home would be key because Bubba, you know better than I do, if the Ticats do not win at home against the Redblacks, a lot of questions will be just screamed from the stands there at Tim Hortons Field. So that for me is a significant game this week.
Mr. Hamilton, you look like you're ready to burst.
No, I was just. I think Matt's right. I like that game, but I chuckled a bit because, as he touched on, I think we're going to find out who the worst team in the CFL is after this weekend. So it's in that one. So, but I think they all have great implications. But I just lean back to the Stamps and Bombers to kind of what Matt said off the top, is that Calgary is reeling right now. They're reeling with injuries. They're 1-2 in the standings. That's going to be a tough, with the West proving to be a bit tougher this year, than I'd argue previous years. Like, I think Saskatchewan is a surprising team this year. I think they have that chemistry under Trevor Harris. They have some weapons, on offense, particularly at receiver, and they still have more to come off injury. So I think West is going to be a tougher out than in previous years. And I think the East, with what you're seeing in Montreal, what we're seeing with Ottawa, if they can become more competitive here. Hamilton, they're hosting the Grey Cup this year, so you have to imagine they're going to turn it around. It might be a tougher, that crossover might be a tougher spot than usual. And so I think a lot is riding on the Stamps this week. They get a healthy Bombers club. At home, where they're going to be, they're not going to still be reeling from that BC loss, but they want to give their fans victories at home, so that's going to be a tough one. I just have to go with that one, but I also think the Elks and Riders game was intriguing because I just don't know how long this disaster can happen in Edmonton without a move being made. And while I'm not trying to take joy in Elks fans' misery here right now, but Chris Jones is trying to reinvent the game, and it's not working. And at 4-18 since taking over in December 21, having not won since week 15 of last week, it's like watching a car accident in slow motion. So every game brings its own intrigue, but I do think the Bombers and Stamps, I think is the big one for the weekend for me.
With that Elks and Riders game, maybe the sight of Chris Jones back in Regina, maybe that brings out the best in him, maybe, or something.
Yes.
There's kind of a weird relationship there.
That's really searching, Bubba. That's really searching.
Yeah.
That's really searching for this team right now, man. That's...
Mr. Avery, you're coming to Steeltown. Is that the game of the week?
Well, I was quite confident that nobody was going to bring up Edmonton and Saskatchewan, but somehow, Bubba, thank you. I don't know, and I don't know how. All due respect, Jeff, I don't know how Calgary can really do anything against Winnipeg.
Yeah.
I just think they're overmatched there, and I looked at Montreal going across the country to play BC. Both teams have an interesting, BC wants to get back and be the dominant team again. Certainly want better player to their quarterbacks. And Montreal is still trying to, illustrate to everybody how good they really are. When we played them the first game of the season, I said, when we were talking about the pregame shows, people were talking about Montreal being, such a poor offseason, all the turmoil. But I looked at the roster. They have a lot of talent on that team. So no reason for me to be surprised that Montreal is doing that well, but I think going across the country makes it difficult for them as well to try and have success in BC. So it does fall back for me to be, I think the most entertaining and intriguing game is going to be the Redblacks at Hamilton. Hamilton has so much on the line here, and Ottawa's just trying to keep it going, and it's a question mark whether they can. They have an opportunity here to keep it going and show some, as Matthew said, they got some confidence out of that first win against, albeit the worst team in the league. But confidence is confidence, and anybody's been inside those dressing rooms, it's a hell of a nicer dressing room after a win than it is after a loss. And practice the next week is improved again. So I just think that's an interesting game to watch, and so I'm going to focus on that one. Of course, I'll be there to visit with you, Bubba.
Yeah, and and you're right there. And obviously it's early in the week. That game being on a Saturday. What interest if Jeremiah Masoli is ready to go?
Oh.
And he hasn't played in such a long time, and seeing him in Hamilton will, Matthew, be, I think, a great thing for not only the Red Blacks, but for the Canadian Football League as well, as we've discussed.
I saw Jeremiah. He looks good, looks healthy, looks like he's been hitting the weights. And I know him well enough to know that if he happens to come back in Hamilton against the Ticats, knowing where the position they're in, knowing that he can go ahead and make that position just a little bit worse, it'll be enough motivation for Jeremiah Masoli.
And Jeff Hamilton, let me throw this at you too. Going back a couple of weeks, I was shocked at the booing that was going on at IG Field in that game against the Lions. And yes, the Bombers got, pushed around a little bit. If there's any sign of that team getting off to a slow start, how will the fans react?
Well, I think just what you just said. I think they've expected a winner. I mean, what I said off the top, they were 27-2 at home before that loss. They expect the Bombers to win every single time they touch home turf, and they certainly don't expect them to get their butts handed to them. And so, I think that was really the intrigue heading into Week 4, because, like I said, the narrative just absolutely 180'd on the Bombers, right? They went from the dominant class of the CFL to being too old and inconsistent to not good enough, and maybe everyone turned 40 overnight. They answered those questions, I think, against Montreal, but and I wrote about this, leading into this week, is that early adversity has bode well for this club. They, in 2021, that shortened season, they came out of the gate after winning their first, Grey Cup in, nearly 30 years in 2019, then losing 2020. They came out of the gate hot, were feeling good about themselves, and then while the game, I think, ended as a one-score loss to Toronto in Week 3, they were heavily outplayed by Nick Arbuckle and the Argonauts that game. And that essentially gave them a bit of a wake-up call. They reel off 9 straight wins and win their second, back-to-back Grey Cup. So I see that a lot of that in, what happened that year. Mind you, it was a couple of years ago. This season, while guys are getting older, that passion, that drive, that, willingness to put in the extra work, I just don't, I know it's not really answering the question, but I just don't see it being something that has to happen, because I think the Bombers are going to be just fine here. But I think when you look at the Grey Cup and them picking, they wanted 2024 real bad for a reason, because that 1 year difference, it might help keep guys in the building for that extra year. I just don't know if it's going to be, if it's necessarily going to be a mutually beneficial decision, for the team as well.
To my trio on the line, you guys have been fabulous. And folks, this is the CFL This Week. And, really we are one of the, the network that has outstanding programming, that if you're a Ticats fan, if you're a CFL fan, you certainly want to be listening to the Ticats Audio Network. You can check us out whenever you listen on your podcast, your favorite podcast catcher. And don't forget to give us that thumbs up, 5-star rating, and subscribe so you don't miss a broadcast. Mr. Hamilton, if people want to contact you, where can they find you?
Find me at Jeff K. Hamilton online, or on Twitter rather, or in the pages of the Winnipeg Free Press and winnipegfreepress.com. You
having fun covering the Jets right now?
Oh, it's always fun, man. It's always fun covering a team that's not sure.
Mr. Scianitti, how can fans contact you?
Always happy to talk to fans in the stands and the sidelines, but you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at TSN Scianitti.
Mr. Avery, are you a social media user? I must ask this.
I am not.
I am not. So you're following in the footsteps of Dwayne.
Another
Ford.
Reason why he's a Hall of Famer.
I think he's certainly the wise one, but they certainly know, as you said, Hall of Famer. They know how to find you, but at least on your TSN radio station. Folks, thank you so much. You guys have been fantastic. Again, appreciate your time and your opinions and your candor, and of course the good laughs. Folks, thanks so much for participating, and to the listeners and the viewers, let's kick it real soon. This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network.